right, welcome back everybody to the Lacrosse the Bay podcast. Today we're joined by Scott Walden, Plymouth State's all-time leading scorer, Hall of Famer at Plymouth State. Played a stint with the Boston Blazers, box lacrosse team back in the mid-90s, and has coached at every level: high school, middle school, youth, boys, girls, box lacrosse, field lacrosse, you name it. Currently coaching for Londonderry High School, four-leaf lacrosse, and the Midnight Riders, which is where me and Scott met, coaching down in Albany. So good to have you on, Scott.
Thank you, appreciate it.
It's me and Skylar back here, East Coast, West Coast.
That's right.
So, Sky, I know you're jumping into your season over there. Maine lacrosse, believe it or not, has actually not even started yet.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I think so. Walden, you're in your first week probably down in New Hampshire this week. Yeah.
Yeah, we started tryouts. We did 3 days of tryouts, and today was the first day of actually breaking out and being with the varsity kids. So it was good.
Nice.
Being inside because the weather's just not ready for us. Having a grass field, we won't be out there for a while. So using the dome, that's about it. We get into the dome, tight spaces, but you got to use what you can.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. We actually they're building a turf for us. So this year we've only got one field at York High School, so we gotta share that, varsity JV girls team too. So it's gonna be
That's the one thing.
tough.
We have a lot of fields, but they're all grass, and they just don't want us tearing it up early. So usually we got to find space where we can. And we'll go scrimmage teams, like it was scrimmage and Singer at St. Thomas next Wednesday, and they got turf. So we find anybody we can to just do anything on turf so we can get out there. But
East Coast problem, Skylar.
Well, I remember that time of the year in playing in high school. I remember it was so conflicting because I was always so excited to have lacrosse season start, but then it was always 3 or 4 weeks of us practicing in the gym, like not really being able to do everything you want to. So it was like it was very conflicting. Like it was so much excitement, but then it was also just like just get me outside.
Yeah, clears and rides, long passes are just something you're not ready for when you get in the game. You just don't take that much time. Yeah,
I remember them playing in a parking lot.
We parking lot all the time.
Yeah. Just chasing balls.
We used to have practice in the dirt parking lot of Londonderry, and we tell all the kids, don't park there. And kids would still park there, dented windows, but we tell them.
No. Sky, how far are you into the season? You're like a month in, right?
I just got back from our spring break trip, so a little farther along. We've had, for the high school, we've had five games, and for the youth about the same. So we're rolling, but our season finishes earlier as well. Our youth stuff finishes May 4th, and the high school's like 2 weeks later. So so we're kind of like a month back, but it's tricky because especially for the high school, the spring sports overlap with the winter sports, so you slowly get guys kind of trickling in as the season starts. So it's an interesting dynamic for spring sports. You definitely have to kind of do what you can at the beginning.
Yeah, we definitely have a clean break. They get to a certain point and you get about 3-4 days off, and then they're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that is nice, but having 5 games already, I would love that because we won't be out there for a while.
Yeah.
It comes like I feel like this is my 4th year coaching in Maine. It's like you start in April and then you just fire off like 3 games a week for a month and a half.
Practices for us when the season starts going is not much because we have 3 games every week. So a lot of guys banged up, and you're basically going film study, some little things, but you can't go full bore. So we have 2 weeks to literally go hard, and then you have to think about the kids and what they're going through. 3 games, hard games. So it's a lot of stuff that's film and everything else in between because the guys just banged up because we had such a short game season.
Londonderry, you guys are you D1 or D2 New Hampshire?
D1.
D1. So that's the Bishop Girtons they've been the team in D1 for 20 years?
Yeah, it's gone in 2 different waves. It was Pinkerton for years and years and years, and then it was BG took over. And when I came out and started coaching with Gordon Webb at Nashua back in '96, we ended up being the first non-Pinkerton team to ever win a title. And that there was only a couple since then, maybe a Concord here, a Sauhegan here 1 year, and besides that, it's been BG Pinkerton forever. They've always been the ones, but I think this year will be the first time BG gets knocked off. I think they're the team to beat. They have 2 D1 kids, one going to Duke, one going to Rutgers. They're a legit team. It'll be the first time in a long time.
Yeah, we scrimmaged them last year. They got a squad. They definitely do.
You scrimmaged Bedford?
Yeah. Last year we did a 3-way kind of scrimmage with them and Falmouth, and that kid, the kid going to Duke, Bennett. Yeah, he's a good player.
He's a great player.
We should Scott, should we jump into the Scott Walden story? I feel like
let's.
It's a long story. My wife even said, she goes, a 30-minute podcast. She goes, they don't have enough time for everywhere I've gone.
Yeah, we can rock longer than that.
You can give us the SPAC notes.
So, I'm living in Wyndham, New Hampshire, which goes to Pinkerton Academy, and right before I'm playing summer basketball for them as freshmen. My parents take us up hiking up north, and they go, and we've done it all the time. Didn't think anything of it. They drive down a dirt road, and they said, "This is your new high school." And I said, well, "What are you talking about?" Mom's going for her second master's at Colby Sawyer College, so we're moving up here. So I went from Pinkerton, which had about 2,000 kids, to a school, Kearsarge, that had 410. And so I wasn't happy at the time, but ended up being great. Mountains, lakes, it was beautiful. But I was a basketball guy, and literally, I'm 17 years old, and one of my buddies comes by the house, has a lacrosse stick, and he said, and I literally went, "What is this?" So he showed me just how to throw and things, and I literally asked him, "Do you have to dribble it, like bounce it on the ground?" He's like, "No." So I ended up playing a year at club, and I loved it. I literally said to the ref, I go, "I don't have to do anything. I just run by somebody." And he's like, "Yep." So loved it. And one of the games I was playing, the referee was the NEC coach, Coach Emmy, one of the best coaches ever. And he said to me, he goes, "I want you to come to me." And I'm like, "College?" I'm like, "We'll see." And it kind of had rough with grades and everything else. And my parents were like, "We're going to send you off for your senior year at New Hampton Prep." And I said, "It's good. I love being away. They taught me everything. Grades through the roof now. The structure, being off on your own." And then I was going to do a PG year. And my parents called me and said, "Your brother's going to go to Proctor Academy as a freshman, and we want you to drive him as a day student." Not happy at the time, but it ended up being the best thing ever. Went there, and we ended up having the best record they ever had. Undefeated, didn't have a game that was in like 12 goals. It was great. And Coach Emmy kept following me, even though every year I said, "Oh, I got another year. I got another year." And my mom was a teacher at Colby Sawyer, so I could go for free. So I went to NEC, had a great fall, loved it. Parents called me, "We can't afford room and board because your brother's going to be going this and that, so you got to come home to Colby Sawyer." So I went from starting as a freshman at NEC to a club school that had nothing, just went co-ed. I was there for about a year, and I had one of the dads of a kid from town come up to me. He's actually a teammate of Roy Simmons Jr. at Syracuse. And he goes, "What are you doing here?" And I gave him the whole spiel. And he goes, "I'm going to make some calls." Next thing you know, I don't know much about lacrosse time. I only played a couple of years. I have Desco meet me at a diner in New London. So now I look back and go, that was major. But at the time, it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm like, so I thought Syracuse was great. He got me in. I'm up there for about 3 weeks before school starts in the fall. And my parents say, "Can't afford it. So you got to go back to Colby Sawyer." Go back to Colby Sawyer for a semester, and finally everybody told my dad, he's like, "He's got to play." What did they find? What's the cheapest school we can go to that's around? And they go, Plymouth State.
Wait. All right. Pause button. That's crazy. So you were New Hampton, Proctor.
Yep.
That was it similar in the 90s? Was it kind of like
so
those same Lakes Region schools were playing each other? Yep. So like Tilton, Holderness.
The only thing that was different back then was New Hampshire really didn't have an actual state championship or sanctioned teams.
Yeah.
So in the actual, we called it the New England League or whatever, was Hanover High School, Pinkerton Academy, and Londonderry. So those are the 3 teams that played in that same league with us. Yeah, Derryfield was one of them too. So it was kind of a mixed match because it didn't have an actual sanctioned high school lacrosse.
And then when you got to Proctor for that PG year, you guys just had a stacked team and you killed everybody.
What was crazy about it was I was playing football there, and my buddy was a lacrosse player too, and he was on the football team, and we went in the gym, and we just started throwing around, and next thing you know, there's like 25 guys throwing around in the gym, and I didn't know many of the kids yet, and the captain at the time brings everybody together, and he goes, I don't know who any of you are, or whether because we have no recruits. None of us were recruited. We had U19 Iroquois national player. We had just kids. We had a defenseman from Guatemala. And the
Nice.
team just came. It was unbelievable. And we're actually going back to be inducted in Proctor's Hall of Fame this May, the 91 team. Not
Cool.
one player was recruited, and we probably had 14 new kids that just by chance loved the school, came in, and we just destroyed everybody. And it was the best team I played with ever. And no one was recruited. Just ended up there. Just all good kids that were just, think about it, defenseman from Guatemala was flying back for the induction. Just the best team.
They got to make a movie about that.
It was pretty messed up because I see the recruiting for the preps and all these different things now, and I'm like, it wasn't that way. We just all showed up and nobody knew anything about it.
This is a theme that's come up in the podcast before, like the beauty of high school lacrosse, where you kind of just get thrown onto a field with a bunch of different guys who lacrosse might not be their number one sport or whatever it is, but you're all kind of there and you're going to battle together, and it's like this dynamic that's just really cool. And that how you're describing it just kind of embodies that.
It just clicked, and there was no egos. Everyone just loved playing. And I remember, and it didn't mean much to me then, but then years later, we're playing Pinkerton, and we don't know anything about them. We're all just together. And at the time, I was a midfielder, actually faced off. And I go up to face off, start of the game, and their guy is just chirping at me. Do you know who we are? We've won 95 games against New Hampshire teams. And I just looked over at my buddy Steve Thomas, the Iroquois player, and he just starts laughing. He goes, let's go. And we were never running up on anybody, but that one game, they were like, these guys just think they're the best, and let's go play. Every other game, we had games we were killing, like Tilton, and we relaxed, moved the ball, played the game, respected it, didn't want to rub it in. That was the one game we always talk about. We're like, we don't go after, but they talked a lot about this and that, and I think it ended up being 25-4. And years later, coaching against Coach O'Reilly, he's like, that was the worst shellacking. I go, it wasn't our bad. I'm like, you guys were really talking. But it was
That's funny.
So you must have been lighting it up at NEC. Like how did who was it that connected you with Desco? That's crazy. So he met you in a diner.
Yep. So it was my buddy Brian Fan. He was just a town kid, really good lacrosse player. All we had was club at the time. And he talked to his dad. He's like, you got to go see my buddy playing at Colby Sawyer. And he pulled me aside, and he's in the Hall of Fame with Roy Simmons Jr. And he just sent up info. And Desco literally said, he goes, we don't do this. This is a favor because they're best friends. He's going to come down. And he literally said, he goes, listen, we don't know anything about you. You're not going to get any money, but we're going to get you in. We'll go through the whole admissions process, get you there. They even popped me in a house. It was probably about 3 weeks before the school started. And I'm in awe of all these guys. But parents called me again, and I'm like, this has been many trips. And I said, whatever's going to work. I go, going back to Colby Sawyer wasn't my best because it was going back to club, and now I was seeing what true lacrosse could be, just playing with those guys on the field, captain's pride. I'm like, this is a different world. And then
who was on the team? Was that Gary Gate, Paul Gate,
No,
Tom
no,
Marichek?
that was after them. It was 92. I think it was 92. So they were just, everybody's stacked. I didn't get to see a lot of the stars because they skipped a lot of the captain stuff in the beginning and stuff. But the freshmen alone and the sophomores, I'm like, this is not a level I was used to. But it was great. Even though it didn't happen, everything worked out because I wouldn't have developed like I did being able to play all the time. You maybe see the field your senior year when you're playing those guys, so you don't develop like you do when you're always out there. So it worked out the way. At the time, I wasn't happy about it, but it all worked out. So
Do you still have like a Syracuse lacrosse T-shirt from that short stint?
I have everything. I have so many Cuse things because I'm like,
cool.
Because back then there was only a few college teams that people even knew about. There was always the same teams making the finals, and they were the one that everybody talked about. So
yeah,
it was awesome.
So
But
go ahead.
Yeah, I knew my buddies at NEC still there. My buddy Jay Delanoy, who coaches at Riv College right now, Riv University, and he was the senior captain when I was there, or junior captain, and he reached out to me when it was a fall at Colby Sawyer, and he said, "Hey, we had a team drop out of a fall jamboree. Do you want to bring your guys down?" So I told everybody, I'm like, "Come on down." And they're like, "These are D3 guys, that real college players." I go, "We'll be fine." So we ended up going down. We played it. I think we lost by 3 or 4 to NEC, but then ended up beating the SNU now. They used to be New Hampshire College. We beat them, I think, by 11 goals. And then we played Plymouth last. And at that time, my parents had talked to me about going to Plymouth. So I went and talked to their assistant coaches and everything else. And they're like, "We'll see you in the spring as soon as things start up." So it was a whirlwind going to different schools and everything else, and finally ended up the right place.
Nice. Who were you guys? Who was Plymouth State playing back then?
So it was different because a lot of D2 schools were D3 back then, because there was only about 22 schools in D2. It wasn't a big deal. So we played St. Mike's, we played New Hampshire College, which is SNU now, and then we had a Cox Conference, but it didn't have any automatic bids back in the day. It was just selections. So we won our conference all 4 years, but you didn't get any automatic bids. And they used to have the ECAC playoffs. So if you didn't make the NCAAs, you go to that. So we made it to that a couple times. But it was all the same teams they play now, pretty much a little east, same conference they play now. But just a few, and we did play 1 year, we played Salisbury, and that was not a good experience, but it was good to be able to go up against that top competition. But I don't think we won a face off the whole game, and I actually switched from attack to midfield just to be able to try and get the ball on the draws. But
Was it only 4 teams that went to the NCAAs? Wasn't that how it used to be?
They had, I think it was 12. It was 12 when I was in school. So it was short.
We played ECACs at Wheaton.
We did, yeah.
We did. Up at Endicott. Right?
We played New England College.
Did we?
1 year we did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was at NEC, Coach Emmy, we played Boston College, Dartmouth. We played 3 Division I teams. I think it was the only school at the time that had, I think we had 9 Canadians. So he was
nice.
Just a master at bringing kids in from all over the place. And we played legitimate teams. They were great back then. Unbelievable team.
You were playing that lefty attack spot? Was that the...
Yeah, so it literally came down when I was at NEC in that fall. Emmy I was a midfielder, but he kept putting me down at righty attack. And he said, "This is the only way you're going to learn how to play with your other hand." And I just got beat up by a senior so bad, but I learned how to play with my right hand he goes, "Go down there." And then when I got to Plymouth, I was playing midi, and I think it was 1 game in after we went to Mary Washington on a spring trip. He goes, "That's it. We can't have you off the field. You're going to attack." So 1 game in, that was it. Midi, done.
Yeah, I've coached lacrosse with Walden probably 100 times. I don't think I've seen the stick in his right hand once.
Not one. It just doesn't happen. Listen, we learned the game. We played, actually, my first game back from the spring trip was against Roger Williams. And my whole thing was, how I learned how to play was, I was at Proctor, and when I came home, I not babysit, but I took care of this guy who had Alzheimer's, so his wife and her friends could play cards. And I just do my homework and with him. And turns out he's a Hall of Fame Dartmouth coach. He was Bill Rich. He was unbelievable, and he had Alzheimer's and he'd be out of it, and she goes, "All you need to do is just watch lacrosse with him, and he's fine." So we'd sit there for 3 hours, and that he would be completely coherent about everything, talking about the players, everything else. And his wife, he said, I'm like, I can't, there wasn't anything on TV back then. So he gave me 2 videotapes, and it was the Gate Brothers. So I go to the gym at Colby Sawyer, my mom was working there, and she'd give me keys, and I'd play wall ball. And I learned how to play by watching those videos. So my first game ever back home after the trip was against Roger Williams. And after 10 minutes, all the defensemen were talking, "I got the Canadian guy. I got the Canadian guy." And I'm like, what are they talking about? And it was because I watched the videos, and I thought that's how I learned how to cradle and dodge and do everything else. And that's, from there on, everybody called me the Canadian. They're like, and that's how it came about, just watching those videos. And I would have had no clue on how to play except for watching them. So it just panned out. And both of his sons were D1 coaches at the time. And they're calling me, "Hey, take care of my dad. We appreciate it." But I'm like, "Okay, great, thank you." But these guys were big wigs. I had no idea. I'm like, "Hey, thanks, I got it." So it all just panned out from that, and that's how I learned how to box cradle, how to do all the moves. Everything they did was from those videos. So,
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah, those two guys are epic. I used to order growing up. I would for Christmas. I would get these NCAA DVDs.
Yeah.
Pick 4 or 5 of them each year. This was when I was 9, 10, 11 years old, and I would just I forgot it was some website, maybe NCAA, and you could pick games. So I was I would get a couple from Cuse back in those times, Cuse Hopkins, watching the Gate brothers, and it's just those guys were insane, just
especially at
running,
the time, because nobody was doing any of those things. Their hands, their passive, they weren't doing it. It just changed everything. Nobody saw stuff like that. And you had so many traditionalists back then who thought it was all garbage. The BTBs, this and that. Today, that's nothing. That's part of the game. But back then, everybody thought it was, what is this? You're supposed to go right, left, do this, and they only have one hand, but it changed everybody's thought on how to play.
Yeah.
I love how I love that you had a couple of videotapes.
Yep.
And Billy, what you're saying about tracking down the DVDs, there was a time where it was hard to find, video content. I had a VHS of the Hopkins Virginia National Championship game that my friend had recorded, and then I borrowed it to watch it, and I just never gave it back.
Yep.
And it's just, I always tell kids now, I mean, you have so many resources. You can watch lacrosse all week long, and that's something that we didn't have back then. We really had to seek it out.
No, you literally can go on now and have ESPN Plus and watch 200 games, and you go back and watch them on demand over and over again. The crazy thing is that the young kids don't watch the full games now. All they do is watch the highlights, so they don't see how that goal actually got scored. And that's the hardest thing about coaching. They just see the finish, so all they want to do is shoot. They want to do this. I'm like, how did that guy get there? You guys don't even watch the games.
Right.
We just watch the games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was having that talk the other day with a couple of the guys that I'm coaching with, because we got huddle and they're like, clips. And I think sometimes it's good, you clip up these situations in the game, but when I'm watching film with the team, I sometimes watching a full quarter just for that same reason. You can kind of see then you can teach, even the scenario, what's happening, that we just played 2 minutes of defense, these guys are gassed, so we're not pushing this break right now, even though in the score right now, what's the score? It's we're up by 3, so we don't need to take a risk. And if you watch 15-20 minutes with the kids and you can sort of I think they understand it in a different way, because the Instagram and the all the reels and stuff these days, it's true, they're getting a lot of lacrosse content, but maybe not watching many games.
Yep. With my youth guys, because I started coaching full leaf the first year they came out. My son was 8 years old, and they just had their last summer ever. So now I'm bumped down to a 32 team. So talking with these kids, and they go through, one of our kids had this BTB that scored, and everybody's, look at this and that. And I go, did anybody remember what really happened in that? He tried to force it 7 times, this and that. The ball bounced off that guy's stick, came back to him, and then he BTB'd. I'm like, and that's all you guys look at. I'm like, the fact that he had 5 plays in a row that he tried to force everything, but it ended up just that way. And all they see is that one highlight that goes online. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, no, that's no. I don't know how many times I've said, no. Okay, good goal. It just happens.
Yeah.
It's so many times.
Yeah. Yellow.
Yeah. Yellow is, especially in this up here. Half your games in the beginning of the season, they can't hear a thing you're saying because the wind's howling. You're screaming things out, and they have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah. I recently kind of. I kind of came to the realization, I don't know if it's completely true or not, but on games, I found that just taking a step back and not really inserting myself into the game itself and just kind of letting it play out is something that I'm trying to do more. And it also kind of plays into what we're talking about with watching the full quarter. A game that's the cool thing about lacrosse, right? It just kind of flows back and forth. There's so much that happens between the boxes. Really anything can happen and something might happen in one defensive end that ends up as a goal 10 seconds later, and the other team's offensive end, and it's just I think that's something that the Instagram clip loses all of that, and even as like a coach, embracing that stuff is going to happen on the field, and just letting it play out,
And that's the thing. Starting coaching when I literally got out of college and started coaching, and that's one thing I finally learned for years and years. You're coming from the old school coaches. We're all screaming and yelling. My parents at Nashville gave me a whole thing collage of all the pictures of me consoling kids, talking to them, everything great. And I'm like, thank you so much. And they go, and then we have this one. And it had every picture of me grabbing helmets, screaming, going nuts. And over the years, you're not going to be able to stay in this game unless you learn it's a different generation, different tactics, different everything. So that's the one thing we always scripted things back in the day. You're going to do this, you're going to do this. And now, after coaching this long and seeing you finally realize, you're like, you got to let them make the mistakes. They got to learn on their own. You let them play. You talk to them after and you go through things. Because back in the day, we just rip kids while the play's happening. And you think about what that does to the kids. And now you literally go through and you pull them aside. They come off, hey, that was good, but why don't you try this maybe next time? And that's old school stuff. That wasn't what it was. There was coaches just, and we didn't have that many good coaches. It was usually like a military guy, a dad, this and that, and they would just rip them, and the kids were used to it. But this day and age, that just doesn't work. You have to let them play and talk to them after and come on the sidelines, and you learn over time, or you can't evolve. But
Let's jump into college. How did the college career kind of end? And then that you got the run in with the Blazers before that you kind of took off with the coaching. But it'd be cool to hear about that.
Yeah. So freshman year came in, I started the midi, and then went to attack and had a really good freshman year. Ended up 5th in the country in scoring, and it was 50-50. I always had assists. I had a crease attackman, which we don't have many crease attackmans anymore. That was his job, Adam Hawks, and learned how to just draw doubles and feed him. So great freshman year. And then my sophomore year kind of blew up. I had the best year. I was in great shape, and that's when I set the record for points in a game. We played against Norwich, and they went into a zone, and first quarter, just wide open. I took 9 shots, and they all went in. So then I'm like, I'm not shooting anymore. So I fed a couple guys, had a couple assists, and then coach was pulling me before half. And that would have been it. But walking off the field, their coach started screaming at me that I'm a piece of garbage and this and that, get off the field. And I looked at my coach, and he goes, go back out and have fun. Ended up having 9 goals, 12 assists. And the best thing ever was the final assist I had. Because back in the day, we didn't have cuts. It was just we'd have like 30 kids come out. And one of the guys was 33 years old. And I love this guy to death. And if you know the comedian Gallagher, that's exactly what this guy looked like. And he went out, never got on the field. And I literally walked him to the crease, put his stick up. I said, don't move your stick. And a quadruple team came, and I threw it, landed his stick, and he didn't do anything. And I'm looking at him, he's staring at me, and I go, shoot the ball. And that was my last assist. He turned and it bounced in the goal.
That's the best.
Years later, my wife and I, she's Catholic, and we went to pre-Caner. I didn't know what it was at the time. It's like even before marriage. He's the instructor of the pre-Caner. And he gives me the biggest hug and talks about it was the greatest moment, this and that. And at my Hall of Fame induction, that's exactly what I talked about. I go, those memories of just this guy, how much joy he had the one time he got in the field. And he can tell everybody I scored a college lacrosse goal. And it was just great. But that sophomore year was great. And then it was between me and Jason Kaufman down at Salisbury for 1 and 2 for scoring sophomore, junior, and senior year. And Kaufman was unbelievable. I got him 1 year out of the 4 years, but just
was he like the short fire hydrant
stocky kid? Yep.
From Carthage, right?
Carthage,
Like with
yep.
the Owls.
Yep. His brother went to Cuse, Jason, but the Carthage kids. He was unbelievable. We played a lot up in Lake Placid a lot together, and he was a great player.
What did he play like? Because I've heard this guy's like kind of a legend,
So he literally could just walk through you. There was no dodging. He just walked, and you couldn't take the ball. And his vision was great. He'd walk him all the way to right before the crease, and then either shoot or pass it off, and you couldn't push him off the ball, and you couldn't take the ball from him. and it was battles between them and Nazareth, and even then, you couldn't stop them. They're still great now. But back then, when we went down to play them, they had a defenseman. They called him T-Rex. He was back then there wasn't that big of guys, and this guy was about 6'6", 225, and just a beast. D player of the year 3 times, and we ended up losing. Was it 32-8, and I ended up with 6-2. And after the game, I talked to him, and he's like, "I don't know who the heck you people are, but nice game." And I'm like, "Thank you, I appreciate it, sir." I'm going, all the respect, but it was a battle with those guys, and just being in the same breath with Kaufman, I was like, I'm good. But yeah, it went from that, and then I was playing in this league they used to have down in Concord, Mass, called the Bryan Elite League, and it was about 8 teams, and this was the best lacrosse in all New England. It was current college players, post-college players, and we had a really good team. I played with All-American from Towson and Jake Cronin, who was on the Blazers at the time. So after we're done, there was a guy, Steve Scher, who used to work for Bryan, who was the Dean junior college coach back when they were really good, and he's handing out these flyers to a couple different players. And they were for like a captain's type practice for the Blazers down in Northborough. And I said, "Hey, can I get one of those?" And he's like, "You're playing at Plymouth State, this and that." And I'm like, "Can I?" And he goes, "All right, head over there." So we went to the first captain's practice, and after it was over, he came up to me and he goes, "I apologize. You definitely belong with these guys, and I'm going to get with Coach Frazier, see what we can do about get you in." And I got the call, and went to tryouts, and I don't know if you've seen what this is like, but back in the day, there was 75 guys in one arena for the first day of tryouts. So I looked at a guy next to me and I go, what do we do to, and he goes, "Just do 1 or 2 things that they check you on the list so you can make the next day." And it turns out that was Mark Terrio, who was one of the Blazers face-off guys, unbelievable. He's the coach at Keene State now. And next thing you know, I'm there the next day. And what they said was, which drove us nuts, was they don't call you if you make the next round. If you don't hear from us, we'll see you at the next tryout. So you're sitting by the phone waiting for this call, and I'm like, did I miss it? Everything else. So I went the next day, and now it's down to 50. And the same thing happens the next time. I'm scared to death, waiting for the phone call. So we get to the last day, and we're sitting there, and I go, "What are we doing?" They go, "We're taking pictures for the media guide." I go, "So I made the team?" Like, there was no, "Hey, congrats," or anything. I'm like, I'm on the team. So we took the pictures, went in. So it was, they have 25 on the team, and they have 3 practice squad players, and myself and Greg Clemens. And Clemmy, I've known Clemmy for years, and Clemmy had played for the Nighthawks and all these different players, and so him and I would talk, and he'd tell me a lot of stuff going on. He goes, "You just wait. There's just not enough. Everybody gets injured. You're going to make it up." So I think it was about 4 games in, somebody got hurt, and they come up to me and say, "Sign a contract." And you go through. And back in the day, I think we got $35 for the Wednesday practice, and if you made the game squad, it was like $400. So it was, and you just were happy to play. And the crazy thing was, after about 2 months of playing with them, I go back to Plymouth just to see the boys and go through, and it felt like these guys were in slow motion. The speed of the game, everything else was completely different, and it was amazing. Following year comes, we go to tryouts, we're going through, and they talk to me about, now we want to move you up to actually playing on the left side with Tommy Ryan. And I'm like, great. And then 3 weeks later, they talk about, we're going to go on strike for more money. And they said, the league's got our back. I said, all right, I don't know anything about this. Whatever you tell me, we're good. 2 weeks later, the team folded. And they were done, and it was over. So I'm like, all that could have gone anywhere, but you're like, it was a great experience. And just playing that box game, because it was different back in the day. The stuff that you and I even teach the kids now is so involved compared to what they taught back then. We had all-American players, maybe a couple Canadians like Rodney, but the stuff we learn now, we didn't do any of that stuff. It's the kids know more than I ever did when I was actually playing in the Major League Lacrosse. So it was.
Had you played box before these tryouts, or was that your first time?
That was my first time ever playing box, and the American players on the team, like Randy Frazier and those guys, thought I was Canadian. And there was a rule back then that we could only have 3 Canadians per team. And they were all in uproar thinking, we can't bring this guy on. That'll be our 4th Canadian. We're going to have to get rid of one. I'm like, I'm American.
Dude, I just grew up watching the Gates.
That's the only thing I knew. But because of that, I was so used to being able to drive like that. just a two-handed. I never had another hand. It was always that same way. And they literally thought I was Canadian. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that got me in there was I just understood how to look and see just like the Gates did, and that helped me in all those games.
Yeah, great. Man. Clemmy, he's I grew up living on Cape Cod in the summer with my grandmothers, and so he started Cape Cod lacrosse. I played 3 summers for the team in Barnstable, the Green Machine. So I got to play attack with Clemmy and this kid Timmy Flynn, who went to Barnstable High, and Clemmy was his coach. So Clemmy must have been 40 at the time, maybe, and I was 18, 19, 20, and Flynn was the same age. So Clemmy'd be out there with us, and he's just kind of out of shape walking around, but doing just the craziest things. Like he'd have 10 points a game. We won 3 straight championships. He's throwing no looks this way, behind the backs that way. Like the first game I'm playing with him, he hits me off the helmet. I'm like, I don't think that's ever happened before. I'm usually ready for
his hands are some of the best hands I've ever played with anybody. Just unbelievable stick skills. He was amazing. And that was like what you said, though, is when the only reason he was with me in the practice squad that time is because he got a little bit out of shape.
Yeah.
His hands never changed, so he was unbelievable. And that they had the Bryan Elite League in the Cape. That was probably the league you were playing in. They had one in Concord and one down in the Cape at that same time. It was just a great league. It was wars. We had Caroline defensemen. We had Brian Vaughn. Our goalie was one of the goalies playing down there. Billy Day was one of the goalies. That league was. They actually posted all the scores and the stats in the Boston Globe at the time. It was a big league.
Yeah, because there was no professional field lacrosse, so that was it.
Yep, nothing. Yeah. And the kids always talk to me about that. Like, did you play pro outdoor? I go, guys, there was no such thing back in the day. I'm like, that was 20 years later. I went to the first Cannons game at Cawley Stadium in Lowell. It wasn't a thing. I said, you guys get to experience all this stuff now. You have heroes that play field, box, everything else. I'm like, we get to see one game a year, the national championship. And that was it. I remember Leif Elsmo being the guy that would commentate on the games. He was the only one that knew anything about lacrosse. But it's definitely changed. Mm. But yeah, when I was at the Blazers, that's when I met my mentor and coaching everything is Gordy Webb. He was our offensive coordinator, and now knowing how hard it is to get assistant coaches, I thought he was doing me a favor at the time. I'm like, he goes, hey, you got any jobs going on or anything? I'm like, well, I'm working at this, that. He goes, how about you come over to Nashua and help me with the high school? And I'm like, great, I'm out of college, let's do it. So coached with him, and learning about him, he coached at Boston State in the 70s, and now UMass Boston. He coached everywhere around the country, and he finally settled down in Nashua and coached Nashua High School, and that was the team that won it. And then a year later, he goes, it's time for me to go. You want to take over? I'm young, and sure. But literally went through with them, made the semis for a couple of years after that, and then life, moving around, doing different things. I was going to coach down in Winchester with Coach Barani and moved around, and then you get into a job, and next thing you know, I go to UPS, become a supervisor, and coaching's just done for a while. It was probably about 6 or 7 years. But then my mom was at Memorial, and she asked me to help them for a year. Then I went to Central. One of my buddies is coaching there. So I ended up coaching, I think, 19 high schools since I started in 96. And it was just helping out. And literally, I just bounced around there like, I just want to be around kids and coaching and just being involved. So I did that. And then finally, my hours moved, and I'm around Londonderry. And the coach, my daughter's now going to be in 8th grade. And the high school coach said, will you come help us? I'm like, hey, I can do it finally. Got up there after a year. He goes, time for me to retire. So I took that over and got to coach my daughter. And it was great. Loved coaching her. Loved coaching the girls. You learn the rules real quick. I remember I would be telling them about face-offs, and they're like, it's called a draw, coach. And learning the rules like shooting space. I'm like, what are you talking about, shooting space? What is this game? But then after a while, I loved it, learned all the stuff, and then got out of that. And then my son's coming up through, and they're like, hey, would you come in and help us out? So I've been at Londonderry as the offense coordinator for 4 different coaches right now. They've kind of gone through a different head coach like each year, and each year I say I'm just going to sit back and watch, and the new coach comes in, hey, do you want to come help out? Okay, let's do it again. So I told him this final year, I'm like, I'm just sitting and watching him. He's a senior. So my son's story is something that I've never heard in my life. We're going to a tournament in the Cape when he's playing four-leaf and he's little. Our goalie doesn't show up. So he goes, Dad, I'll do it. I'm like, you sure? He's like, yeah. So I threw him in. He ends up being the tournament MVP as a goalie. Never played before. He's like, I want to do this. I like it. Years later, makes varsity as a freshman, starts, got named goalie of the year as a sophomore, has LIU, Manhattan, a bunch of D1 schools looking at him. A couple weeks later, I'm traveling to Four Leaf to do another thing, and my wife calls me and says, Colby is too afraid to talk to you about this. And I go, about what? He doesn't want to play goalie. He doesn't love it. I go, what are you talking about? He's got offers, doesn't love it. He wants to play attack. I go, he hasn't played attack since he was 9. That's what he wants to do. Fine, let's go. Ends up being my leading scorer, scored 92 points last year. And so when he was a goalie, I said, what about Plymouth? I'm not going D3. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. What ends up happening? Leads the team in scoring, got second team All-State, the only player to ever get All-State, first team goalie, and then get it as attack. And he commits to Plymouth State. After all that, he ends up going to my alma mater as an attackman, and he's going to have my number.
Wow.
So it all works out. I'm like, it couldn't have been better. I can go see him games at my old school. My buddy Willis is up there, great coach. And I go, it was just a whirlwind where I'm mad at him going, you're throwing away opportunities. That's what he wanted to do. And now he's so happy playing attack. That's what he's wanted. I go, whatever. It worked out exactly like he wants to go for education. They have it. He wants to coach. I'm like, it worked out. But in your mind, you're thinking, you're going to go here. You're going to be this. And he's like, I don't like it. And I'm like, if you don't like it and you're not going to work, it's not going to be what you want. You want to love playing. So I said, you made the right choice. But I go, you fought me so hard. He goes, I had to do my own thing. I had to learn it my way. And I'm like, good for you. Good for you. So it was crazy, crazy path.
That's cool that you recognizing the needing to have that love for the game in terms of being able to really reach that potential or perform or just enjoy playing sports in college. What's one thing you think that either you try and reinforce as a coach or something that you've seen in different programs that kind of creates that love for the game of lacrosse, whether it's a team space or just getting kids involved for the first time? Yeah.
So I found, and you can look straight back to my path. I was going for basketball. I played at New Hampton with Bobby Knight's son, Pat. That's where I was going to go. And I never had lacrosse in my life, so you never had any parent pushing you. They didn't know what it was. It was my own thing. I went out, loved it. So many of these kids now start and they play year-round and they get burnt out. And you see a lot of the parents being the ones pushing all these things. They're so worried about where they are in a team, this and that. And you see these kids drop out because it's not their thing. Just going out and loving and playing with their friends. They get all this pressure from everybody. And the biggest thing I tell all the kids, like I went up to Caribby, who's one of the best just kids. He's a great player, but he takes his dad's like this. Do your thing. I got nothing to do with this. You go have fun. Whatever you want to do, let's just go do it. And you see those kids. And so I try to talk to them. We were at World Series, and I'm talking to all these great players, and I'm going, stop freaking out. You're in Delaware playing against these guys, and you get to hang out with your buddies for a weekend. I go, nothing else matters. Win, lose, go up, have fun. And too many times, all these things are taken so seriously that kids stress, and they lose the love of it because it becomes too important instead of just, this is something you love. Go play. Just go play. And you see those kids all the time. And they get so stressed about it. I'm like, guys, you're playing lacrosse with your buddies. You get to hang out. You guys go back to the hotel and hang out, go to dinner together, do all these things. Those are the things you'll remember. You ain't going to remember whether you lost to Team 91, whatever. You're going to remember the times with your buddies doing all this stuff. And if you do that, those are the kids that go out and throw and have fun together. When they love it like that and there isn't that pressure on them, that's the kids that stay. And I've said it so many times, these parents, when the kids are getting recruited, she can't go there, he can't go there, they need to go Division I and this and that. And I go, is it the right school for them? Are they going to love where they're going to school? Are they going to get a chance to play if they work hard? Those things. And in the end, the ones that made those right choices to go to the school they actually liked, even if it wasn't that big name, are the ones that are successful and they remember it years later. Having the status of going to different places and everything, all that pressure, that doesn't mean anything in the end. Like at the time when I got bumped out of Cuse and this and that, very mad. But in the end, just like my son, it ended up being exactly where I needed to be. Got to play all the time. I remember my buddies, we still hang out, talk about all these different games and things that happened. Didn't matter it was D3. Didn't matter it was this. It was just the fact that we loved playing. No stress. We're like, this was a great time playing, being with your buddies and just living, because that's all it is. That's all you remember. You don't remember all the wins and losses. You remember all the times with your buddies doing on trips and everything else. So they got to love the game or it's just not there. And I didn't have that pressure because nobody knew what it was. It was just such a new thing back when I was playing. Nobody. I thought you had to dribble the ball. So it was my own thing, learning stuff. Hey, this is cool. Let's do this. And that's what made me want to stick with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. One thing that I'm always kind of getting in the weeds on with our youth program is development and trying to make sure that the game makes sense, as we go through different age groups. So one age group that I'm always kind of struggling to really make sure they're getting the most out of their lacrosse experience is like the 12U age group, so 5th and 6th graders.
Yep.
And sometimes we have some teams that play like short-sided World Sixes and some teams that play full field. What are your thoughts on short-sided games at the youth level versus playing full field? Like, do you have any like preference or thoughts on it? Because it's something that I have a lot of conversations about, and I'm always trying to tap into other people and see what their thoughts are.
So my whole thoughts are, after making the Blazers, they told a bunch of the American players, you need to go up to Canada. You got to go up to Canada in the summer and get as much experience as you can. There's a reason why they are better at stick skills in every way than the Americans are. That's because when they're little, there's 5 of them on the field playing box, and they touch the ball. They constantly have the ball in their stick. If I had my way, they'd go to U11 before they even got on a full field going through. The kids being able to touch the ball versus kids standing there waiting while the ball's down there, doing all those things. Short-sided games, and that's why I think the Sixes, if that gets bigger and we can push that down with the youth, and we just had a tournament for 4-league for Sixes tournament, and it's great because teams would have 10 kids, and they're always on the field, always touching the ball, always moving together. When you get to those younger ages, they have to have the ball in the stick. Otherwise, they're just standing around waiting for things to happen. If it was my way, that's why I love getting these kids in the box, because all the kids we've had in Riders for their first year came back with us in full leaf and were standouts, because it was all about the 5 players always touching the ball, always moving it, playing together. So you get the unit to play together, and they move. Off-ball movement in Canada is great because they know they're going to get the ball back. When you're in America, they give it up, and it might be some kid trying to go through 10 kids, and they go. But in Canada, or short-sided, you're going to touch the ball. You know you're going to get it back, so everybody moves. I would go short-side as long as you can so these kids all get touches. It's just touches is the biggest thing. And I saw my son when he was U9, loved it, short-sided field, 6-on-6. They did the thing, all touched it, and then they move up to the next age group, and they might touch the ball once a half. It's much better doing the short side. I love the short-sided games. So,
yeah, it's music to my ears. Because I also, the thing that I love about box and Sixes is that everybody's just moving up and down the field the whole time. Like, even if you're doing 7v7 short field, you still have 2 people who are waiting on one side of the field for the ball to come back. And obviously there's more touches there, but I think just if kids are going to, because for us out here, it's not like New England where the sport is established and well known and pretty much mainstream at this point. It's moving out of the mainstream because you see it on ESPN and things like that, but I have to go up against flag football and soccer and create something, that makes sense. And so a parent who's never experienced lacrosse, if their kid only touches the ball twice in a game, like why would that make sense to play? You know what I mean?
Yep. And that's the thing. And that's one reason why I love the Sixes and box is without the long sticks. These kids, when they play defense with the short stick, learn the footwork. All these kids that have the poles in their hands, they lose all these bad habits because they use that 6-foot stick and they don't move with their feet. And when we get these kids that are defensemen here that go up and play with the short stick even for a season, they come back and they get a long pole in their hands and they realize this is just an addition to my footwork and getting in front of people. And that's why the box part is great, because these guys literally have to play every position. There's no I'm an offensive guy. I'm this. Too many specialized players these days. Back in the day, we had those two-way middies that you just don't see as much anymore. But those are the guys that played lacrosse the right way. And the kids touching it, playing defense, seeing the field. I just think it's great. But like you said, when you go the true kind of like sixes that we do, kind of like here, 2 defensemen stay back with 2 attack. They're still waiting and watching the ball go down the other side. And that's why I love playing and coaching the box game, because you're constantly involved. We had, I think it was 2 years ago, we went to a tournament for riders, and it was me and Coach Baker, Kyle Baker. We had different things happen. One guy couldn't get into the country. He was Canadian because of this. Another guy's sick, this and that. So it ended up being just him and I coaching 4 teams. And we literally went through, and you're watching all these kids just unbelievably develop and get better at the game. The kids that never played it before, they came back and they completely different players because they understood the whole game on every part of it. Off ball, help your teammate, give them space, all these different things that you just, when you get youth, and especially up here in New Hampshire, you get 2 or 3 kids that are the man, and the coaches give them the ball, let them run through 19 people, and then they get to us and we're trying to coach them up, and it's just not the way you want to play as a team because they're so used to being that guy in that big field. But you get those guys in box field, and that just doesn't happen. They're going to get taken down, and they learn quick. I have to use my teammates or I can't play. And that's the thing you love about boxes. You literally cannot score if you think you're going to be the man and score the goal. You have to be a team or it just doesn't happen. I love that part of it. Trying to get more kids and more kids involved, so it's good.
Yeah, it's a great version of the game for sure.
Yeah.
Billy, did you have any follow-up questions before we go into the speed round?
No, let's hit it. Let's speed it.
All right. So we're just gonna do some rapid fire questions for you. All right, pizza or calzone?
Pizza.
Which toppings?
Sausage and pepperoni.
Nice. Favorite college team to watch?
Syracuse.
Favorite NLL team?
Buffalo Bandits.
Oh, cool. If you could go back and play a different sport in college, what would it be?
I played 3. I loved basketball the most. I played 2 years. No, that'd be my second one.
So were you playing basketball while you were playing lacrosse at Plymouth State?
I played basketball at NEC and then basketball at Colby Sawyer. Not Plymouth State, but Colby Sawyer. And then finally, coach said, "Yeah, you're done with that. This is your sport." And I'm like, "Okay." So I played 1 year at NEC and then 1 year at Colby Sawyer. Loved it.
Were you missing the start of the lacrosse season?
I literally went to both. Coach let me go through because I was at NEC. I was 6th player off the bench, 1st player off the bench. But at Colby Sawyer, I was a starter, but they were clubs, so it wasn't that big a deal. I told Coach, "This is the deal." It was no big deal. But I would have. That's why at Plymouth, the coach said, "You're done. You're not missing time." I'm like, "Okay, I got you, Coach."
I love it. Okay. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Blue, and then sweatpants during cold games or no?
Okay, so this is great that we're talking about this because I know you have the idea. Okay, so we're at Albany coaching, and I'm in the in-between. Wind pants, whatever. Our another coach, Coach Swanson, is in full-on sweats, pants, top, everything else. And then we have the fine dressed in his khakis, nice tight shirt. That'd be Billy.
Yeah.
So we said, "You need to be the one standing on the bench because we look like grubs." So we took the doors. So we let Billy be the one that was distinguished. He only looked the part. We were pretty much grubs. So
you're wearing the pants. All I had to do.
I love it. And what about players? Like players wearing sweatpants on the field?
Don't like it. Don't like it. I understand it, but I don't like it.
Okay.
Only a goalie. I'd give goalie
absolutely. Goalies that catches it, but literally, I said if we wore that back in the day, we would have been killed. We were never allowed to wear anything like that back in the day.
I love it. All right, well, that's the speed round.
Weren't you forced to wear sweatpants at Colorado College, Coach Toner, for your sprints in 90-degree sun?
Yes.
High altitude.
Yeah, we had to. Yeah, we had to earn the right to take our sweatsuits off, and we hadn't quite earned it. So, yeah, we played like 80 degrees in Colorado Springs, for like 3 year practices. So, Hey.
People think about Colorado being that cold stuff. I've been out there in that time of year. It's hot. It is hot. It's brutal.
Yeah, and you add the altitude. Yeah, you add the altitude to that. That was, yeah. Yep. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's how we tell them now.
All right. Well, thanks, Scott. This was great. It was fun chatting with you and learning your story and getting some insight from me. So we appreciate you being on the podcast.
No, it was a good time. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Good to see you, Billy.
Good seeing you too. I'll see you Saturday.
See you Saturday.
That's a